Hey everybody, how's it going? It's me, Logan Joyce, aka Suburban Yinzer, and right now I'm down here at Southside Cemetery up here in Carrick off Brownsville Road. And right now I'm with my fourth great grandfather, Henry Christian. His German name was Heinrich, but the Americanized name, the anglicized name, is Henry. Henry Christian is a very special man in my family, on my dad's side of the family from Southside. Heinrich Christian, aka Henry, was a German immigrant. He was from Hessen, Germany, and he was an immigrant from Hessen. Him, his wife, and his two children, Reinhard and Elizabeth's my third great grandmother, came from Hessen, Germany, and immigrated to the United States in 1847. They were escaping Germany in the wake of the big revolution of 1848, when the peasantry, or the poor people around Europe, were going to revolt against the monarchy and the elites. But regardless, when they then settled in Pittsburgh. After they came from Baltimore, they settled right here in Pittsburgh. But then they settled in the south side of Pittsburgh. But at that time, Southside was known as Birmingham Borough, because Southside wasn't called that. It was called Birmingham, and it was on the other side of the Mon River. Many of the different places around Pittsburgh were called different names. That's why you have the Birmingham Bridge going across the Mon River. It's called Birmingham Bridge because of Birmingham Borough, which was Southside. So, or is Southside today. So, Henry Christian is very special because not only is he my fourth great grandfather, but he is also a veteran of the 74th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment of the Civil War. But to give a wee bit of a background about the 74th Pennsylvania, I'm going to take this piece of paper I got from Gettysburg and read you about the background of the 74th. After the battle, the first Bull Run, July 21st, 1861, Lincoln wanted to basically increase his army, basically to suppress the rebellion of the Confederacy. So the German citizens of Pittsburgh were recruited by Captain von Mitzel and were joined by others from Philadelphia, and they formed the 35th Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment, which then, later on, was formed into the 74th, led by Colonel Alexander Schimmelpfennig. So Henry Christian, his son Reinhard, and his future son-in-law, Henry Riebel, my third great-grandfather, were all members of the 74th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment. The 74th was a all-segregated German regiment. Now, many of yins watching this are going to say, whoa, Logan, segregated? What are you talking about? This is Pittsburgh. We don't segregate up here. But that's not true. If yins don't know your history, yins don't realize that back in the 1800s, even up here in the north, there was a lot of ethnic segregation. Many places in the north were ethnically segregated by Germans, Italians, Polish, Irish, etc. So the Germans formed their own regiment. Example, the 74th Pennsylvania. You could either be born in Germany or have German parents, but you had to be ethnically German to be part of the regiment. So he was 43 years old in 1861. His son Reinhard was 18, and his future son-in-law was about, as a 22 when they all enlisted in 1861. So following the Civil War, marching in Virginia and fighting the multiple battles against the Army of Northern Virginia, General Robert E. Lee, throughout the Shenandoah Valley, Henry was a witness to his son's wound at the Battle of Second Bull Run, or in Confederate terms, Second Manassas, at Manassas, Virginia, in late August of 1862. His son Reinhard was shot in the knee, in the leg, at 19 years old. He was sent to an army hospital, where then a month later, the wound festered, which was very common at the time. They amputated the wound on September 21st, and his son Reinhard died when he was 20 years old of infection that spread throughout his bloodstream and died. He was 44 years old when that happened, when his son was killed after the Battle of Second Bull Run, which made a very deepening wound on his psyche and on his mind, which then later caused him to become an alcoholic and basically dabble in insubordination and going and drinking. But regardless, he was also a veteran. Him and his son-in-law, Henry Riebel, they were also veterans of the Battle of Chancellorsville in May 1863 in Chancellorsville, Virginia, and the big battle, the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st through 3rd, 1863. His son-in-law, Henry Riebel, was not involved in the Battle of Gettysburg because he was shot in the arm at the Battle of Chancellorsville, and he was recovering from those wounds at an army hospital. Henry Christian, though, was the only ancestor of the 74th Pennsylvania that was still active and fully capable of serving in the Battle of Gettysburg. In Company K, he was involved in every single event throughout the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st through 3rd. Under the north side of the town, all the way back to Cemetery Hill on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. He was part of the retreat back to Cemetery Hill when they formed a defensive line to stop the General Ewell's Confederate advance to try to push the Union off of that stronghold on Cemetery Hill. Henry Christian, my fourth great grandfather, was part of that defense in Gettysburg, which is very honorable. So he later was then transferred, in the 74th, was then transferred to South Carolina, fighting in the island campaigns in South Carolina, where then he was later discharged on December 5th, 1864, at 46 years old. And this is a wee bit of a side note. Henry Christian, surprisingly, was one of the oldest non-officer enlisted men in the 74th Pennsylvania. I would assume the oldest. He was born in 1818. He was as old as many of the officers, the generals, the colonels. He was just as old as most of the officers at the Battle of Gettysburg. The colonels, the generals, and he was a private. So it just shows the experience and the wisdom of a 40-some-year-old in that company to be able to mentor and to basically teach and guide the younger 20-some and 30-some-year-old men and tell them what to do, not only because of his age, but because of his military wisdom for fighting in the Hessian army while he was in Germany before he even came to America. And while he came back to Southside and recovering from his mental wounds in Birmingham, he acquired a lot of property in Southside and, struggling throughout the years mentally with the alcohol, the drinking, the recovering from the wounds of losing his son tragically in the Civil War. He then died in 1887 at the age of 68, and currently he is buried right here in Southside Cemetery. Now, here's the sad part about it. Here's the crazy part about it. There are no markers on his gravestone that commend his Civil War service in the 74th Pennsylvania. He wanted no recognition for his service. He wanted nothing because of how, I would say, just scarred he was from losing his son. He wasn't ashamed. He just didn't want any recognition because it felt like that maybe he was just scarred. He was traumatized from that. But me and my dad, we placed a U.S. veteran marker years ago with a U.S. flag because even though he doesn't have a U.S. Army Civil War marker anywhere on this beautiful, huge stone, we wanted to recognize him and to commend his service for our country. And also, to give a wee bit of a side note about his son, Reinhardt, I just found a couple weeks ago that his son is buried at Alexandria National Cemetery in Alexandria, Virginia. That's where he was buried after he died from his infection of his leg wound after the Battle's Second Bull Run. So in the future, me and my father are going to visit Alexandria Cemetery and visit his son, my third great uncle Reinhardt, who was killed during the Civil War. But anyway, from Southside Cemetery, I'm with my fourth great grandfather, Henry Christian. Thank you. Hey everybody, how's it going? It's me, Logan Joyce, again. Right now I'm up the street a wee bit. I'm talking about my third great grandparents, Henry and Elizabeth Riebel. Now, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to realize that the stones are knocked over. Because of the years and years of ground shifting and ground moving. The stones knocked over because of gravity. It has been my objective for many years for me and my dad to come up here and move these huge boulders of stones, because they made stones back then to last a long time. And so what I wanted to do, though, even though it's totally sacrilegious in my opinion, but what I wanted to do, though, is to commend them. Me and my dad come up here all the time, and we always pay tribute to my third great grandparents, because not only were they German immigrants, but my third great grandfather Heinrich Riebel served in the 74th Pennsylvania Infantry with his future father-in-law that I was talking about a wee bit ago, Henry Christian. Now, Henry Riebel, as for him, he was 20 years younger than his father-in-law, Henry Christian. He married his daughter, Elizabeth. Now, Henry Riebel was shot in the arm at the Battle of Chancellorsville, Virginia in May of 1863, when Stonewall's brigade ambushed and basically came out of the woods and blitzed Howard's 11th Corps, and hence the name the Flying Dutchman. The 11th Corps was consisted of primarily German immigrants or German people, men. Now, they were completely routed and flanked and ambushed by Stonewall Jackson's brigade of the Army of Northern Virginia. They came out of the woods. Now, a little bit of a backstory, he was running. Henry Riebel was running for his life because you had screaming Confederate rebels coming out of the woods, ambushing and flanking Howard's position. The Germans are running because they're going to get slaughtered. So the Union loses the battle to the Confederacy, and they label my ancestors the Flying Dutchmen, the cowardly Dutch, that they were cowards for running for their lives, for being ambushed and being blitzed by by Stonewall Jackson's brigade, after General Howard of the 11th Corps of the U.S. Army left them out high and dry because they were Germans and didn't respect them and didn't care that they were going to get absolutely slaughtered, and was warned multiple times that that something was moving out there, and he was like, and then the Germans get literally slaughtered. He was shot in the arm because of that. He was shot because of that complete, let's say, ignorance to the warnings. Howard's ignorance to the warnings and to the alarms that Jackson was out there and he was going to come and flank him and he was going to hit him hard. So, even though the Germans got thrown under the bridge, or thrown under the table, you know what I mean? In my opinion, history can say what they want. The nativists and the anti-Germans and the anti-immigrants could say whatever they want at the time. But these men were fighting for the preservation of the Union. They were fighting for the United States of America. And that's why I'm here talking about them. Because if it wasn't for these men, if it wasn't for these immigrants, we wouldn't be living here in freedom. This flag was basically sacrificed for Germans. Blood, sweat, tears, and lives. Like his brother-in-law, Reinhard Christian, that I was just talking about up the road, he was killed for that flag. He died for that flag, the Union. And men like him were shot in the arm. But what's really cool is he was actually present at Gettysburg after the battle. Even though he was injured, wounded at Chancellorsville a month and a half before, he was still present at Gettysburg as the cleanup crew or as the occupational force. Because on the tablet at the Pennsylvania State Memorial in Gettysburg, Henry Riebel is labeled. And why would he be labeled if he wasn't at Gettysburg, if he was shot in Chancellorsville? Because he was still active duty after Chancellorsville. He was still active in Gettysburg. Even though he wasn't at the Battle of Gettysburg that I know of. Might be, might not be. He still might have been with the regiment at the time. Who knows? I don't know. But what I do know is that he was at Gettysburg either during the battle or after the battle. But he was then discharged in October of 1863 from the 74th Pennsylvania. Served in the 16th Volunteer Veterans Reserve Corps, the VRC, then discharged in 65, and then lived the rest of his life in Birmingham, which is Southside, and then died in 1893. The cameraman just swatted away a bee. Don't mind him. And He died in 1893 at 55 years old of an asthma attack on Jane Street in Southside. So that is the biography of Henry. Now his wife is a whole different biography that I'll be going into a wee bit in the next video. But anyway, peace.